everyone. Welcome to our state assessment presentation. It's that time of the year where our 3rd through 8th grade state assessments will begin in just a few weeks. And so we want to thank you for coming out tonight. And we're actually going to share information. Our goal tonight is to make sure you leave with more information than you came with. And we're also going to ask you to help us share that information with other parents that you come across. So you'll get to meet a team of district administrators tonight that will share information with you about the assessments that will be administered to your children in just a few weeks. They'll also go over the dates. They'll talk about goal and purpose for assessments. They'll talk about how we use the assessments in this district, which I think you'll find is a little counter to the publicity that goes on around the state. We'll also answer any questions or give you information about kind of the hot button issue of opt-outs, which is what you hear around the state. But we'll be open to any questions that you might have. And I think that you'll find that we drive a lot of our curriculum decisions based on information we receive from these, what we consider program assessments, okay? So here's an agenda, but it can be a loose agenda because we want to be responsive to any questions that you might have tonight. So we'll talk about formatting and what those assessments look like to students, changes that have been made over the past few years that make them a little more user-friendly to our children, okay? We'll help you understand maybe what's in there as far as the content of what they're going to be looking at, and then how do we analyze them. Of course, we get the results from the state, and you want to know how your kids did. We kind of look at that big picture, and we look at, from a program standpoint, what can we then do in our classrooms to make adjustments for students. And we'll also talk about accommodations. So if we have students that have accommodations, whether they're a Section 504 plan student or whether they're a CSE student. So we're certainly open to that, and then any other questions that you might have. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Reinhardt, our middle school principal, to take you towards the next part here on ELA assessment.
Good evening, everyone. For our ELA assessment this year, we have a choice of either doing paper-based or computer-based. In the middle school, where I'm at, grades 6, 7, and 8 will be on computers. Down below, grade 5 will be in computers, and grades 3 and 4 will be on paper-based. But as you can see, the way the test is located, let's see if I got a pointer here. For session 1, there's going to be 2 sessions, which is ultimately 2 days of testing. And they'll have the number of passages for day 1 is 4, with 24 multiple choice questions, and then that would be day 1. And then on day 2, we would have 3 passages, and this is where you get the short answer questions. What did I do? Sorry.
Touch the screen, that's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Touchy, I didn't even think I touched it. And so for a total number of questions that we have, and this is in grades 3 through 4, okay? You can see the progression as it goes up from grades 3 to 4 to grades 5 to 6, and then into the middle school. And you can see the number of questions each day and what they entail. For our assessment format in math, and math will take place at the end of April, early May. You will see for grades 3, 4, and 5 the same breakdown here. You'll see the number of questions on day 1 and day 2 as far as multiple choice and short response questions, and then extended questions. And you'll see as it goes from grades 3, 4, and 5, those total numbers of questions can change. And then the same format in grades 6, 7, and 8. You can look at the number of questions, multiple choice, short answer, short response, extended, and you'll see how that progression goes from 6, 7, and 8. Any questions with that? Okay. Understanding the assessments. I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Hibbert, our Katie Stanton principal.
So the really great news is that when we got a new commissioner just a few years ago, she made some excellent changes to the assessment process that benefited our kids. So teachers often said, boy, it's a long time for kids to sit. They don't have enough time. We gave all this feedback, and then the commissioner responded, which was really great. So first thing to note is that all the questions are developed by teachers now and reviewed by teachers. wasn't true 5 years ago. So that's huge for us because if teachers know how our kids learn, so we like knowing that teachers from New York State are going to Albany, writing and vetting these questions. We're preparing students for future assessments. So, you know, if teachers didn't have to give tests ever, we probably wouldn't. There's so many great learning projects, but that's the way that not only we can assess their learning, but we're preparing them for the future. No matter where kids go, career or college, they're probably going to have to take different types of assessments, both paper-based and computer-based. So we're preparing for those things. The really great thing is these tests are really a program review to see how we're doing at our job of teaching kids. So Mrs. Berkey will talk more about how we use that data, but it's all about how are we doing. It's not about the students' grades. So this will in no way impact their academic standing, their report card, what courses they take. It just helps us understand what do we need to do to teach better or better prepare students. I think it's been 3 years now where we've shifted to untimed testing. That means as long as students are working and still going at it, they may test as long as they want. We do have some students who sometimes we stop them, feed them lunch, and let them continue if they really want to keep working at it. So they're not penalized if they don't finish in time, which is great, because that used to be a problem in the old format. Decrease in test days, this was huge. So until last year, it was always 3 days. 3 days for an 8-year-old got really long and tiring. So when they switched to 2 days last year, we were thrilled about that. The students had much more stamina and did a much better job because of it. We also are really happy that this is about supporting the work of teachers and administrators. So we're using that information we get on your students to improve what we do. So in the summer, Mrs. Berkey will talk more about this, but we're looking at data, we're making decisions about how can we provide a better curriculum and instruction to our students. And we transitioned to computer-based testing. You know, I talked before about kids are gonna have to take tests. Probably unlike us, they're gonna be taking them all on computers. SATs talk about going that way, Regents exams, if you're taking any college preparatory courses, they're taking on computers. So we wanted to jump on board to prepare our students. Plus, starting in 3rd grade, they have access to Chromebooks all day, every day. So they're used to that style. So in 2016, we did field tests. Field tests are just practice questions, not assigned to a student at all. So it's just the way that the state can kind of try out and vet questions. It's very short, it takes about 40 minutes. And then in 2017, grades 5 and 7 were the first to pilot the CBT. So the students took them on the computer. And then last year, and then again this year, everyone in grades 5 through 8 will take them on the computers. And we'll continue to assess and see when we think 4th grade might be ready for that. And we'll continue to expand our CBT, our computer-based testing. Last 2 items. So we want to ensure the district remains in good standing. There are requirements by the federal government for participation rates. That's not a worry here in our district. We have very supportive families, and so we have plenty of students, more than 95% typically, who participate. There are some families who feel strongly or differently about that, so if you have questions at the end, we'd be happy to share that with you, but we don't worry about that, but we also want to make sure we're always ensuring that our students are participating, so we meet those federal requirements. And back when this was in the news even more, there was a lot of concerned parents that these tests were using teacher evaluations, that it wasn't, a lot of families felt it wasn't fair to judge a teacher based on a test that a student took. So 3 years ago, the new commissioner did that. So these tests are no longer tied to teacher evaluations. Teachers do so many things that we don't necessarily want to evaluate them on a student who sits for 2 hours, and that's it for the whole year. So for now, those still are not used for teacher performance ratings. Anybody have any questions on those items? Easy. Okay, Mrs. Berkey will talk about curriculum.
Okay, so Mrs. Hibbard and Mr. Reinhardt, you alluded to how do we use these assessments to help drive our decisions in the picture here. Okay, so I'm going to just share a little bit with you about how we go about doing that. Now, how deeply we go into this depends on when we get the results back from the state and when they release questions. So what the state has been doing lately is they're able to release more and more questions so that as educators we can kind of dig deep and look at those questions to evaluate where our gaps are in our curriculum and where our strengths are with students. So this is one report that we're able to generate from BOCES as a result of students taking this assessment. You'll see over here, these are the standards, okay, the learning standards. This just shows you the page number, question number, MC multiple choice, and this is a percent of points earned per question. And then it gives you a breakdown on what students answered holistically. So what percentage of students answered that question with an A, B, C, or D. And then we'll talk about gap to region in just a second. So this provides an overall quick glance of how well we did on particular questions in general. Okay, so for example, this one will show that we earned 40%. Okay, so 40% of our kids got that question correct. That gives us information on, is that a skill that we need to work on a little bit more, we need to target, or are we doing really great things with that concept, and we know, let's have a conversation about what we're doing well to get kids prepared for that question, or what do we need to kind of readjust curriculum-wise to allow them to achieve at a higher rate on that. So our last column, gap to BOCES, gives us some information that is pretty critical to us in terms of a perspective. So if we are in the minus, that means we're below average compared to our colleagues in the region, right? So there's 25 different districts in our Wayne Finger Lakes region, so we're comparing Seneca Falls to those students, okay? So if we're in the plus, that means we did better than our average across the region. So that gives us a little glimpse as to kind of how we did. Why that's important is a question may be difficult, may be worded in a difficult way for students. So if a lot of students didn't do well on that question, that's information for us. But it kind of levels the playing field and tries to tell us, well, comparatively, how did we do? So this is where we can kind of break down specifically how our students did on questions and look at the details of the question. So, boom, here is multiply or divide to solve word problems involving comparison, okay? So we're gonna take a look specifically at that question. When we look at the question, teachers sit around a table, check it out, okay, let's read it and really break down where either our strength was or our misunderstanding was in general. So the price of a board game is $24. The price of the board game is 2 times as much of the price of the jigsaw puzzle. What is the price of the jigsaw puzzle? So then we can take a look, okay? Our students answered, 44% said A, 2% said B. B was not confusing to them, didn't throw them off. C with 5%, that really didn't throw many of them off either. But D, 49%. So our students struggled between, do I multiply or do I divide, right? So that gives us information on wording, and we get to go back in the specific question and say, okay, is it a vocabulary issue? Is it a computation issue? Is it a concept development issue? What is the problem here, and then we can change our instruction to help improve that. Any questions on that? And like I said, depending on when this all gets released, really depends on how deeply we dive in. This also is not something that's different than what we do with local assessments. So with the assessments that are derived by our teachers, we constantly give them feedback. We analyze them, and just teams take a look at those questions and do the same exact analysis process. So what we do here is not different than we do on an ongoing basis with ELA and math. Okay, Joe?
This slide is just an overview of the 2019 assessment schedule. You can see the different dates, the makeup dates, the scoring dates, and the final dates that we have to submit the sheets, the answer sheets to the scanning centers. And then they break out the different types of state assessments. First one is the NYS assessments. That's for our students with disabilities that do have some pretty severe cognitive impairments, so we have a low percentage of students taking those. Then the English and the math, paper-based, computer-based. And then our NYS SLAT is for those students, our ELL students that speak another language, they have to take that every year. And then there's the 3 sections in that. Oh, I did the same thing. The highlighted part, not anything that we need to worry about. The state changed this original schedule, so when they changed it, they sent the highlighted one. So that was the only date change they made. Okay. So we do have some students, as Mr. McKevney said, that get some accommodations if they have a Section 504 plan or a IEP through the CSE, Committee on Special Ed, or if they are a student that has English as a second language, so they're learning our English language, there are some accommodations. We have to select those. The teacher does that prior to testing. Our ELL students have bilingual glossaries, oral translations only in math, of lower incidence languages. So Spanish is a higher incidence language, so we have some of those available that we can order. And then they can also have simultaneous use of an English and their alternate language exam if they need that. Students that do have a disability and are reflected in an IEP or a 504 plan, they have some flexible settings, so they may have a little separate location or a location with minimal distractions. Flexible scheduling doesn't come into play as much as it did earlier when assessments were timed. Now they're untimed, so students do have as long as they need to complete the test, as long as they're working right along. The other thing with scheduling though are some of our students may get break periods. So we call those natural breaks, so we allow them to, put everything down for a while, maybe go get a drink and come back to the assessment. Obviously, they can't talk to any other students or anything, like that. Method of presentation, if there's a change in that may be in their IEP or 504 where we have a statement that says, check for understanding of directions. So directions are read to them, as they are to every student, but we may ask those students that have that accommodation, so tell me what you have to do, just so we know that they understand exactly what it is they're required to do. And method of response, some students may use speech to text, so they speak their answers and it types for them. Some, when they, not so much for computer-based, but for the paper-based test, the bubble sheets, some of our students have tracking issues, so we might have them just answer in the test booklet. So that's how they respond to the test, as a little change in method. Again, all of those must be documented in the either 504 plan or the IEP. And then there's some accommodations that are included on the computer-based testing, an answer masking tool, so that allows the students to focus on the display one choice at a time. Initial page zoom, so you can make it larger, smaller. Reverse contrast, all the text is in white on a black background. Sometimes that helps those kids that need that different type of visual presentation. Background color can be changed, because sometimes black or the grayish color is not the most optimal for some of our students. And then the screen reader, which is the text-to-speech, reads the text of the directions, passages, question items, and answer choices to the student. So those are the accommodations that students are allowed. ELL students are entitled to those, and if you are a student that's learning English as a new language, you don't necessarily have an IEP or a 504, but you are entitled to those accommodations. And I think that's the end, so if anybody has questions or comments for any of the members of the team, we'd be happy to take them.
I have a question. Is there a minimal time that students have to sit for?
No.
Yes.
Yeah. So at the 3-5 level, which I think everyone here is second or third grade parent